Triangles Day 1, May 11th, 2020. I can classify triangles by their angles as acute, obtuse, or right. What is a triangle? A polygon, or shape, with 3 straight sides and 3 angles. Here's our kinds of angles we know: acute, right, obtuse, and straight. Now, here are the kinds of triangles. Acute triangle, 3 acute angles. A right triangle has 2 acute angles and 1 right angle. An obtuse triangle has 2 acute angles and 1 obtuse angle. Let's watch this video to learn more.
Hi, welcome to Math Antics. In this geometry lesson, we're going to learn all about triangles. You may remember from the lesson about polygons that triangles are special polygons that always have 3 sides and 3 angles. And that's what the word triangle means. Tri means 3, and angles means angles. Okay, that's easy enough. 3 sides, 3 angles. But what else is there to know about triangles? Well, for starters, we're going to learn how to classify triangles. Ooh, such a classy triangle. But seriously, there's 2 different ways to classify or organize triangles. They can be classified by their sides, and they can be classified by their angles. Let's start by classifying triangles by their angles, since we've already learned a lot about angles in the previous videos. You may remember from our first video about angles that there's 3 types of angles. There's right angles, acute angles, and obtuse angles. Well, watch what happens if we use a third line in each of these angles to form closed shapes. Aha! Triangles. And can you guess what these 3 different kinds of triangles are called? Yep. The one made from the right angle is called a right triangle. The one made from the acute angle is called an acute triangle. And the one made from the obtuse angle is called an obtuse triangle. So that's simple enough. But notice that for each of our 3 triangles, the new angles that were formed when we closed the shapes are all acute angles. So triangles always have at least 2 acute angles, and it's the other angle that determines what type it is. That's important to know so you don't get tricked. For any given triangle, just because you see one acute angle, that doesn't mean it's an acute triangle. You have to look at all the angles to tell if it's an acute triangle. The situation's easier with right and obtuse triangles because you can only have one right or obtuse angle per triangle. So as soon as you spot one of those kinds of angles, you know what type of triangle you have. All right then, classifying triangles by angles is pretty simple, but we can also classify triangles by their sides.
Our number 1 rule is every triangle has 2 acute angles. Steps to identify triangles by their angles. Step 1, write an A next to both acute angles. Step 2, look at the third angle. Ask yourself, is it a perfect square? Is it smaller than a square or larger than a square? What do we know about this shape? There's 3 vertices and 3 sides. What type of angles make up this triangle? We have acute on the top, acute on both sides on the bottom. There's 3 acute angles. This is an acute triangle. What types of angles make up this triangle? Those 2 are acute. That's a right angle. 2 acute angles and 1 right angle. It's a right triangle. Step 1, write an A next to both acute angles. Step 2, look at the third angle and ask yourself, is it a perfect square? No. Is it smaller than a square? No. It is larger than a square, so it's an obtuse triangle. Identify each type of triangle as acute, right, or obtuse. I'm going to write my acute angles. See how I mark them? Now I'm going to look at the third angle. I could rip off the corner of my paper. Is it bigger or smaller than that 90 degrees? I noticed it's bigger, so I'm going to mark it obtuse. That's an obtuse triangle. All 3 angles on this guy are acute, so that's an acute triangle. For C, I mark my 2 acute triangles, and I find the third is a right angle, so it's a right triangle. Here's your Monday math, classifying triangles by angle. A triangle is any polygon with 3 sides and 3 angles. There are many types of triangles. One way triangles can be classified is by the measure of their angles. All triangles, a triangle has 3 angles The angles in a triangle must add up to 180 degrees. Note, all triangles have at least 2 acute angles. A right triangle has 1 right angle, an obtuse triangle has 1 obtuse angle, and an acute triangle has all acute angles. Look at each triangle below. Color each angle according to the chart to the right. Then determine which type of triangle it should be classified as, right, obtuse, or acute. For right angles, red, obtuse angles, yellow, acute angles, green. I marked all my 3 angles as acute and green. That's an acute triangle. Here's your Tuesday math. More practice. Classify triangles by angles. Look at each triangle, color each angle according to the chart below, then determine which type of triangle it should be classified as, right, obtuse, or acute. Right angles are red again, obtuse angles are yellow, acute angles are green. I marked up my triangle, 2 acute angles, 1 obtuse. That's an obtuse triangle. Circle all of the right triangles below for the last step. And Wednesday math, classify triangles by angles. For each triangle in the chart, record the number of each type of angle. Then classify the triangle as right, obtuse, or acute. Let's look closer at our example. Do you see the example triangle? There are 2 acute angles, which technically they all have 2 acute angles, unless it's an acute triangle. Number of obtuse, I don't see any obtuse angles, no angles that are larger than 90 degrees or larger than a little square. And there is 1 right angle. Number of right angles is 1. So I know this is a right triangle. If I look at number 1, what size do you think all 3 of those angles are? Hint, starts with an A. Those are 3 acute angles. So when it says number of acute angles, you're going to write 3. Number of obtuse angles, 0. Number of right angles, 0. So that means it's a acute triangle.